7 o'clock.
So we are the first stop for them.
Oh, see, we're fortunate.
We're ready?
We're
Good.
one of the last stops in the morning.
Yep.
But one of the
Okay.
last stops in the afternoon too. So.
I'm going to call the regularly scheduled select board meeting of Tuesday, February 13th to order. We just completed inspecting the new ladder truck at Fire Station 1, and what a thing of beauty it is. Very well organized, and we were quite impressed. We knew that the crew had done a lot of, that the entire station had combined all their efforts to come up with a plan that was going to be efficient and improve upon their operation. But when you see it and have a chance to walk around it, you can see the methodical process they had followed led to a very good delivery of a fire station truck. So next is approval of the agenda. And I don't know, do we have any changes?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second. I don't know of anything, Kathleen would have said so.
Okay. Hearing no changes, and all in favor of approving the agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Approval of the minutes of our January 23rd regular select board meeting.
I'll move.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any recommended changes?
I have a couple of small ones.
Please.
Line 93. Can we just strike after where it says the sidewalk plow from going around it? I don't think they're actually, the sidewalk plow has to go around the tree. I would just say as it impedes the sidewalk plow, and just scratch from going around it, because I think it's clear in the rest of the paragraph that there's damage to the lawn when it goes around to avoid the tree. Would that be okay?
Okay.
And 284, 285. I was just gonna suggest, I guess it's on line 285, recommending the board move to allow the town manager to negotiate a contract with them. It was just a little, it was a little, it was, move to author, okay?
Yeah.
That's fine. It just seemed a little clumsy.
And they
something
authorized the
there.
town manager, and the board authorized the town manager to negotiate a contract?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And then just one more quick one. 392. Sealy suggested a meet and greet for the board to see the new ladder truck. I would just add the word "see" in there. Otherwise, they were fabulous as always.
All right. Any other changes?
No.
Okay, hearing no further, all in favor of the minutes with the recommended changes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Next is citizen comments. Is there anyone that's here for something that's not on the posted agenda? Please. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Fuentes George. I just wanted to introduce myself because I'm running for select board. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Lindsay Fuentes George. I wanted to introduce myself because I'm actually running for Middlebury Select Board, and I kind of entered the race a little bit late, and some people don't know who I am. So I'm just introducing myself. I have a nice write-up by John in this past Thursday's Addy Indy and a letter to the editor that ran yesterday, February 12th. And I also have a Facebook page, Lindsay for Selectboard, if anyone in the community wants to get to know me a little bit better. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. We would start with you, Chris, to review the policy committee's report on the 6-month review
Okay.
of our personnel policy.
Thank you, Brian. So I've got 10 minutes on the agenda, and I'm committed to keeping us on track.
It was a lot of work.
It's like the perfect one to talk.
Okay, so I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Policy Review Committee to report on our 6-month review of the personnel policy and to make 2 requests of the board. The first of which, of course, is to ask you to adopt the amendments to the personnel policy that the committee has proposed as a result of the review, first and most importantly. And then I also want to spend a few moments discussing very briefly with you a supplemental recommendation that the committee is making in regard to potentially phasing out 2 existing provisions of the policy. Because we recognize that this is a potentially controversial issue for staff, and you'll understand in a few moments why, I want to emphasize that the committee is not requesting that you actually approve eliminating the provisions tonight, but simply that you authorize the Policy Review Committee to work with Kathleen and with the department heads to explore the feasibility of it. And the possibility of replacing them with something else down the line. So at this point, that's all we're asking for. So on to the review. It was nearly a year ago that, as you recall, that the board agreed to accept the Policy Review Committee's recommendations for a comprehensive update of the town's personnel policy, the first since 1999. And after fairly extensive discussion, the board agreed to adopt the policy, but you also directed the Policy Review Committee to conduct a review after 6 months to give the department heads an opportunity to give us feedback on implementation issues, any questions that they have about the language in the policy, and to possibly suggest further revisions. So last June, the committee put out a call to all the department heads asking for their feedback on the personnel policy, and specifically the first 6 months of implementation. And we invited them to sit down with the committee in August to go through their suggestions. In the end, Town Clerk Ann Webster was the only individual to actually come forward with input. We had our first committee review meeting in mid-August of last year, and we were joined both by Ann and by Treasurer and Accounting Services Manager Jackie Sullivan, both of whom remained with us throughout the entire review process, which was very valuable to us. Jackie's presence turned out to be especially helpful because as part of our process of review, we went through a multitude of what-if scenarios, testing potential changes to time reporting procedures, how holiday and vacations and holidays and sick time is scheduled. And Jackie was able to give us virtually real-time feedback on how those potential scenarios might affect her office, her procedures, NIMRIC reporting capabilities, and so forth. So it's really valuable for us to have both Ann and Jackie with us throughout the whole process. So with Ann's input as a guide for the discussion, we met a total of 8 times over a 4.5-month period between the middle of August and wrapping things up in early December. From the committee's standpoint, I think it was an extremely valuable exercise to go through, to have that sort of formal, comprehensive review, to see what sort of feedback we got. And I think we ended up with a good product. So many of the revisions that we're proposing tonight are simply intended to clarify or expand upon language that's already in the policy. I'm happy to go through all of those with you individually if you wish, but in the interest of keeping on track within our time frame, what I'd like to suggest is that I simply take a moment to highlight the handful of what we're calling material changes to the policy, and then circle back around after and see if you have specific questions about other provisions that I haven't touched upon. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, beginning in section 2, on page 2, paragraph 2.01, we took time to clarify at Ann's suggestion what actually constitutes seasonal and temporary employees. The original policy had discussed full-time and part-time employees, but the town has other employees that fall into other categories. And interestingly enough, as we were looking into how to define seasonal and temporary, we discovered that even the definitions of full-time and part-time aren't necessarily straightforward. The Federal Labor Standards Act includes language around full-time and part-time, but declines to define what those actually mean. And we actually ended up turning to the Vermont Department of Labor to find a definition for seasonal and temporary, which ended up in that paragraph. So it was Ann's suggestion to expand the definition of the persons covered so that it was clear that seasonal and temporary employees were not covered by the policy, and that made a lot of sense to us, so we did that. In paragraph 2.02, I put this down as a substantive change, but it really isn't. It's simply a clarification of the language around what happens when the language of the town's collective bargaining agreement with the union might conflict with a provision in the policy. Clarifies that in those situations the collective bargaining agreement prevails unless the provision is in the policy in compliance with federal or state law. This is also something that Kathleen and I are going to have to discuss at some point with the union, just to make sure that they understand which provisions those are, in fact, that they are governed by under the personnel policy. Jumping to section 13 on page 6, discussing performance evaluations, the language. Section 7? I'm sorry? Section
Hours of service.
7, I listed as clarification language, not necessarily substantial updates.
Okay.
Section 13 regarding performance evaluations, we changed the language here. It was very non-specific as to how frequently performance evaluations should take place. It used to say pretty much at such time as the town manager or his or her designates decided that would be the case. We thought there would be value in specifying at least annually. And the performance management system that we're in the preliminary stages of putting together will support that idea of annual reviews. Next material change comes in section 18, holiday leave and personal days, on page 9, paragraph 1805. We simply, this paragraph had to do with providing unpaid leave for employees who wish to attend their own town meeting if it conflicted with their work schedule. This is actually required by state law, so we elected to delete that language since it's already covered by statute. Section 19 under vacation leave, paragraph 1901 on page 11. We, in the updated iteration of the policy last year, we had noted that part-time employees for the first time could earn vacation days, which was new. What we neglected to say, and thanks to Ann for pointing this out to us, that the vacation accrual is on a prorated basis, depending on the number of hours that a part-timer is scheduled to work, and it's based on a 40-hour week. Paragraph 1903, regarding, again, vacation accruals. We altered this language slightly. The old policy had simply said that that an employee is entitled to accrue up to a maximum number of hours that an employee can accrue over a 2-year period, but that if they accrue vacation days beyond that but don't use them, then they begin to forfeit them. We simply changed that language to be more specific, to say that accrual actually stops once you have reached that 2-year limit. Paragraph 20.03 on page 13, under sick leave. We rewrote this paragraph for clarity, and we also added language stating that part-time employees are not eligible to receive payment for unused accrued sick leave. They can accrue sick leave under state law like anybody else, but they are not entitled to receive payment for any unused accrued sick leave. Section 21 on page 13, paragraph 21.01. We modified this paragraph to remove the exclusion for part-time employees for bereavement leave. We just felt it was the right thing to do. Section 35, it's a new section. And under this provision, we're suggesting that the personnel policy itself should be reviewed every 2 years by staff and/or other parties as designated by the Select Board. And those are what I would call the substantive changes, revisions. Are there questions about that, or any other questions regarding the updates?
Questions or comments of Chris?
I would only comment that I think it's great.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, good job.
Great job.
I think feels good to have something that is up to date and current and makes sense and it's clear, so
Yeah, thank you.
thanks to you and the personnel policy.
The entire process was extremely valuable. It really forced us to go back and re-examine a lot of the decisions we made the first time and remember in some cases why we made them. And it was good to have Ann there challenging us, and we did not always agree, but the conversations were always very candid but very respectful. And I think we're pleased, the committee is pleased with where we ended up.
Great.
Super.
And
Yeah?
Can I talk into a microphone?
You want to grab a chair?
Yeah, I don't really want to disagree with anything here, but I do want to point out, just for the policy regarding holiday time, is that this policy is making a change in how we have done it in the past for full-time people, and that it specifies, now that we're taking on part-time people, that you would be paid holiday pay for the days that you work, the number of hours that you do work. And this is actually a change for us, and it would affect at least one employee, and the intention is to grandfather that person in. So I think it should be transparent that it's a policy which we are going to grandfather someone in. And I'm personally bringing this up because I will have to negotiate with you. I won't actually be covered by these policies in my office. So the next step is for me to negotiate with you my contract and the contract for my office for benefits and that. So I want it to be made clear that I may be asking for something similar in terms of that grandfathering of that. So I just want to be clear that it's there. Okay?
So, Victor?
I just had one question on bereavement leave. Now, you've taken out the sentence that part-time employees are not eligible
Yes.
for bereavement leave, but I don't see any provision for them in this. Did I miss something?
You mean a positive statement that
Yes.
part-time employees
Oh,
are
right.
eligible?
In other words, we're not saying that they don't have it,
Right.
but then we make there's no provision in this for them.
They need to be added in. It says
Yeah, that was the subject of a fair amount of discussion, actually most of an entire meeting, because in a number of areas, we were trying to walk a line between being prescriptive versus allowing there to be a supervisory discretion in certain matters, one of which was bereavement leave. We could very easily put an affirmative statement in here that says full-time and part-time employees are eligible for bereavement leave and simply leave it at that. But you're right, we left it out, and it begs the question to an extent, are they or aren't they? We also didn't want to get into the area, having made part-time employees eligible for bereavement leave, we didn't want to have to legislate on what prorated basis they might be, because it just didn't feel right. So,
I mean, it seems to be not mentioning them at all.
Mhm.
Is basically not including them.
Understood.
And therefore, it puts, it seems, the staff or management in the position to say, well, it doesn't mention it, so there isn't any.
Mhm.
Which you may as well put the sentence back in. So what I'm suggesting is that there needs to be some positive statement
Mhm.
somewhere in this that says something. I don't know, I don't have a formula that I'm recommending to
Mhm.
you, but I think that, otherwise, I think it's going to get, you know, said, well, and I would be a little bit concerned leaving it simply up to someone's discretion, because then you get, you know, a situation where, well, if you can really persuade someone that you feel very bad and you need time off,
Mhm.
whereas others who might be more stoical might simply, you know, so I do think that you need to address this. It just seems to me that it leaves, the silence leaves open a possibility for abuse, I think, or at least unfairness, and this is supposed to be a fair policy.
Understood, thank you.
Can you not just say all employees instead of saying full-time employees?
We can. That's an easy way to solve the problem. Good, thank you.
I have a question first, Russ, and I'll get with you. On the, what's the budget implications of adding holiday pay to our part-time staff? Did we look at that?
We did not ask Jackie for a readout on what we typically pay in a year. The answer is we don't know. If that is something of concern, if you think that it could have a material impact, we'd certainly be happy to look into
I
it.
think we should know if it does have a material impact. Just, I'm not sure that's, I don't know, maybe that is normal for townships, but I know a lot of businesses that part-timers don't get the benefits. So I do see we're starting to roll benefits in for part-time staff, it looks like. I don't know if that's new.
It is new.
Is that a complete change?
Mhm.
So, well, it may be good. I don't know. I'd like to know what the budget ramifications are of that.
Okay.
Ross?
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Ross.
I had a question.
Sure.
Did I understand correctly that language allowing,
Would you,
if I understood correctly, language allowing staff to know that they could take unpaid time off to attend town meeting was being stricken?
It was only because it's in state statute.
And
the
so,
town is
so the
required to
question
comply.
is, how will they know they have that option?
Good question.
So maybe leaving it
Leaving it in.
in is a good thing to do. That's my
Easy
only
enough to
comment.
restore. Okay.
Yeah?
I just wanted to make a comment about the cost of it. And obviously, there is a cost in terms of creating a benefit for employees. But typically, I would say that with our budgeting process, that normally a department head is going to be looking at what are the wages I'm paying for whatever hours somebody's working. So like if I have a part-time person working, say, 15 hours a week, I'm going to be budgeting to pay them for that 15 hours a week for every week of the year, because that's the only way that I know I can be covered to do that. So if I actually end up giving them a day off and paying them for it, my budget isn't any different.
The services would be different because there's
Yes.
10 days of
Yes.
vacation time that they would not be working.
Right.
And
Right.
so as a
Right.
business person, I would like to know what that,
Yes, so there's definitely a
There's
cost
a lot of
of
loss.
how many days.
there's a lot of lost time potentially, so.
Okay, great, thanks.
Other questions?
Any other questions of Chris? Pleasure of the board, would we like to just have him come back, talk about that one? There's a couple things that I think we wanted clarification on. Or are you prepared to adopt it as is?
I think that one item you've raised is a big enough item that it would be best to have clarification on it. I mean,
What-
otherwise, I'm fine with it.
Which one is that, Nick?
The one on the cost.
Okay.
I mean, otherwise, I'd be game for it the way it is, but it's fantastic, and I hate to send it back for anything, but this is, I think, is at least a significant enough item that we
Yeah.
should understand. Not that it's gonna change the outcome, but at least to understand.
Yeah, the hard work is done, so if we need to go back and make a few
Appreciate that.
alterations, that's not a problem.
But it's not a new benefit by approving this. It's already a benefit for part-time employees based on what you approved a year ago.
Mhm.
Just so you're aware of that. It's like-
We approved it a year ago?
Mhm. Yes.
That's what I was just gonna point out, so,
So then you didn't change it?
Not including part-time.
They just changed how it accrues.
That's right.
right.
The adjustment in this revision is how it accrues, how the process works. But
Clarify.
it
Clarifies,
clarifies how
right.
yeah.
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 But the benefit, this is not a new benefit in this version.
That's correct. Yeah, I should have made that clear. It's not new compared to what you adopted a year ago. But your
So-
question is still valid.
Was that
So-
pointed out a year ago?
Hmm?
That
Yeah.
it was a new benefit?
Yeah.
How'd I miss that one?
But you got it this time, so we'll take care of
Yeah.
your question.
I think last year we were concentrating on having it get reviewed in 6 months just to see how it all played out.
Mhm.
And you guys did a great job with that.
I'm surprised you didn't have more, the fact that you didn't have more participation from the other department heads would tell me that they were accepting of the policy. But a little disappointing to me that they didn't actually participate
Mm.
some. So,
So maybe we should amend the policy adopt the policy with the amendments.
well, pleasure of the board. So,
Yeah, I'd like to see finishing revision.
Mhm. Okay.
it's so close. I mean,
It's-
if you
yeah.
could get your committee back together, finalize those last couple things, and then let's adopt it without having to say that we question one or two things. So
Right.
just to see.
So the two follow-ups I have are an affirmative statement regarding bereavement leave for part-time
Yes.
employees, and Ross's suggestion to restore the language regarding time off for town meeting.
Correct.
And we'll also follow up on your
And then
question
just if
about
you could let us
budget
know
impacts.
what the implications are for the providing that new benefit.
Sure. Okay.
Great, thank you, Chris.
And then very briefly, if I may, the committee, in the course of doing this review, there were a couple of provisions in the existing policy that have been around for a very long time that we thought, to a certain extent, had outlived their original purpose, and that an opportunity exists, perhaps, to consider phasing them out over some period of time and replacing them in some fashion with what we're trying to do with the performance management process that we're beginning to put in place. Those two provisions are, and I included these in another memo in your packet, are the sick leave buyback provision, which, just reading from the memo, allows, if a full-time employee has accumulated more than 15 days of unused sick leave by May 31st of each year, the town will pay the employee for 33 1/3% of any accumulated days over the 15 days by June 15th of the same year. So it becomes a cash payment. This provision was created, and my understanding in talking to Jackie about it is that this provision has been in there probably since the mid-'80s. At one time, the town actually paid employees who were leaving the payroll for any unused and accrued sick days that they had. And this provision was a way to address the town's accumulating liability for that. At some point since that time, the town has decided no longer to pay employees when they leave the payroll for unused unused sick time. But this provision remains. And so it has become, to a certain degree, an expected, anticipated entitlement for employees. We, as a committee, felt that there were some valid arguments against continuing that as an entitlement, not the least of which was a concern that it may actually provide incentive for the wrong behavior, to encourage employees to bank their sick days when they should actually be using them in anticipation of getting a check at the end of the fiscal year. We think that rather than focusing on the entitlement aspect of this, that there may be an opportunity here to shift the focus away from that towards a more merit-based system tied to performance. The performance management process that we're working on is still very much in its infancy. We're working with Paula Cope, whom you met with last year, to put that together. And it's something that we're going to be rolling out very slowly, very deliberately, very methodically over the next year or so. And we think that it might be worth a conversation about phasing that out and replacing that with something tied to performance. We felt the same way about longevity pay in Section 27. That's also a legacy benefit for employees. It's been there for a very long time. As we were talking about it in committee, Anne pointed out that longevity pay is really the only tool that she has to recognize her employees for their commitment to the town, which is exactly what it's designed to do. But again, it's an entitlement to the extent that once you've crossed a certain threshold of years of service to the town, you can expect this payment year over year over year. And it's not tied to any performance objectives or any evaluation of an individual's performance or contribution to the town. So in that regard, as well, we felt that there might be a window of opportunity here in the context of the performance management process that we're working on to expand the discussion beyond what we're calling entitlements and turning it more into a merit-based conversation. It's controversial. I've already been getting feedback. I understand the pushback. And it may not be a good idea, but it seems like the opportunity is upon us. Why not take it? So at this point, as I said, all we're asking for is your permission, essentially, for the Policy Review Committee to begin working over the next year or so with Kathleen and with the department heads to explore whether this is feasible for the culture that we have here, and whether it's something we can make work in a performance management setting.
Guidance from the board?
Well, I mean, we may or may not know if it's better, but why not find out now?
Mhm.
I think this is a great idea, and I would, when the time comes, be willing to make the motion.
I know a lot of high-performing organizations, you have to have a way to reward, and if your only way to reward is on longevity, this doesn't seem to tie to the performance and trying to be a high-performance organization. So I'm all for at least looking at it and opening that discussion, and whether you had to phase that in over time, and certain people were grandfathered through to the end because they were so close, but certainly all of your newer employees to be able to at least start a process that was maybe moving us forward and tying pay to performance I'd be all for it.
I think you've demonstrated that you work well with the committee and the department heads already, so it's worth the exploration. So.
Okay.
Do you want to say the thing?
I can say everything, unless you want to say anything. Okay,
I think it's time.
Okay, it is. I'll make the motion to authorize the policy review committee to work with town manager Kathleen Ramsey and staff to explore options for phasing out the sick leave, buyback, and longevity pay provisions of the personnel policy and transitioning to a performance-based compensation model.
And I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Amy?
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm Amy Sheldon. I'm project manager for the Middlebury River Flood Mitigation Project. And this is Roy Schiff from Malone McBroom, our engineer on the project. I think we have 15 minutes. I hope we still have 15 minutes.
You do.
I'm going to be very brief in an introduction, then I'll let Roy explain how the project's changed since the last time we met. And then we can have questions. We'll hope to have time for that. So essentially, we're here today talking about trying to manage flood risks in East Middlebury Village. In recent history, 1989, there was a significant flood where the river jumped its banks and caused a fair amount of damage to the village area. It resulted in NRCS building a berm behind the Aussie Road properties. Probably also was required Gristmill Bridge flood wall shoring up, though the bridge was in a different location. In '89, fast forward to 2008, we had another significant flood event. It damaged the Lower Plains Road Bridge, and the river also jumped its banks then and ran down Main Street. And then, with increasing frequency perhaps, 2011 we had Irene, and the Lower Plains Road Bridge had been replaced to a bigger span, and it seems like maybe then the river it caused the river to get through the bridge, but then jumped its banks downstream of that and caused significant damage and resulted in needing to shore up the flood wall at the Gristmill Bridge. So we qualified for FEMA assistance from the disaster declaration from the 2011 Tropical Storm Irene. We've had to do some significant background work. The town didn't have a hazard mitigation plan, and we now have a townwide hazard mitigation plan, which makes us eligible to get the FEMA funding, and we're here today. I think the last time we met with the Selectboard was before the July 1st flood event. And then we had a significant July 1 this year flood event as Roy was sort of just getting into the design of the final design plans. The first phase of this project included final design plans at the Gristmill Bridge Road flood wall, but not the other elements. So we got a continuation grant to finish the design elements, and in that process this flood event happened, and we ended up walking the river with both a large group of residents who explained to us what it was actually like the day of that flood. And then also we waited so that we could walk it with the state and talk through our design options, and that was like August 1st. From there, I'm going to let Roy pick it up and walk you through the project elements of the new proposal.
Okay. Thank you. Again, my name is Roy. I'm a water resource engineer. We've been working on the Middlebury River since 2013, and we have a current alternative that's we're designing right now, and it includes 4 pieces. I'd just like to summarize those. And the first one is to remove sediment from flood chutes. Yeah, maybe I'll go up to the map.
Why don't you talk and Amy could point?
Okay.
It could be
Yeah. And these flood chutes are, you can imagine they're pressure relief valves.
We're starting downstream.
I'm not going to speak specifically, just you can show like a flood chute area. There's one, and they're labeled. And what happened in the Tropical Storm Irene flood, as well as the flood this year, is that the inlets of those flood chutes got clogged with sediment and wood. So when the floodwaters rose, they went to the river right side towards the neighborhoods and not spread across the valley. And also you can see there's diagrams of sediment bars, and these sediment bars grew an excessive amount. Sediment was moved out of the mountains across this area you see on the screen and deposited in these bars, and it narrowed the channel in some locations. This is a new phase, a new element of the project. We were planning to restore floodplain further upstream to try to create storage. That's really what this is all about. This is an alluvial fan. The river wants to spread across the whole valley bottom here, but there's there's infrastructure and houses in the way, and we've put a berm there to confine the river. And within the remaining area, there's not enough space for the water, the sediment, and the wood, and the ice at times to get out of the system. So it's sort of artificial. In an ideal world, we would pull back from this river, let it go across its valley. In the long term, it would form soils and we'd farm down in there, but right now we're full of infrastructure. So this is really intermediate to long-term management approach that the state has endorsed in several really high-risk areas across the state, and this is one of them. We've worked on another one in Bennington, Vermont, along the Roaring Branch, where they have set thresholds of sediment because the sediment's rising and clogging bridges that cost $1 million, and if it clogs them up, they'll fail. And so we've set thresholds at each of these chute areas to say, at what point does the flood risk rise to the point where it might erode away the berm and go into the neighborhood? And when it crosses that risk threshold, we would move to clean out the inlets of those chutes and the bars. Now, it sounds quite impactful. In fact, this is a lower impact alternative than the floodplain restoration alternative, which we had to clear a lot of forest, and it would cause a very large aesthetic impact. And Fish and Wildlife was concerned that we'd lead to warming of the water. The chute and bar clean out is not done in the river. It's done during low flow, and these areas are sitting high. If you went out there now, you could walk in these areas and there'd be just mounds of sand and gravel. They're out of the river, so when you do this, it sounds like it's a very aggressive alternative, but it does not impact at all the fish habitat. There is a small impact to get to those locations. It's temporary. You have to build a haul road across, and then you remove that, and you have a small restoration footprint under where that haul road was onto the river. There are a couple other components. The Aussie Road berm has no armor on it. We've seen, in the short time we've been working on this project, we've seen water flowing across that berm. Our hydraulic modeling shows that the berm in sections is prone to erosion, and pieces of it, for example, right behind Goodrow Lumber, are eroding right now. So we're proposing to armor a couple pieces of that berm. Again, most of it is away from the river, but we think the river could, in a big flood, migrate towards these select locations. That includes laying rock where that black line is along the berm, and you can see the river is actually towards the bottom of the screen there. So again, that piece is largely performed out of the river. And then there's two other components. The flood wall was repaired after the last flood. In this flood, it wasn't damaged severely, but the rock and some of the material underneath that were placed in front of it are now gone. The flood wall, we did a structural analysis, is prone to tipping, so we're proposing to put in some sheeting and anchor the wall to make it last for a lot longer. We're also proposing to extend, or I should say rebuild, the piece of the flood wall in the downstream section. It's about 150 feet that failed in previous floods. So the four components, it's important to note, as Amy said, that we really refined our alternatives analysis based on what we learned in the most recent flood. And also, I think there's been a little bit of a shift in the thinking by the state. Removing material from the river is not a great alternative in most cases. But if you can do it out of the water and not impact the habitat, ironically, it's actually a better, less impactful alternative than restoring a floodplain where you're exposing the riparian area to more sun and taking away trees. So again, the tree removal for this project would be very low along the river. The few areas we would have to remove trees to get in, we would replant on the way out. And then the end is that you'd have, a fix that you might have to maintain in the future. If another large flood comes, I mean, there's a mountain of sediment upstream, up to the snowball, and it's coming down to this spot. If there's a big sediment event, then we'll have thresholds established for the town to be able to monitor those and go in and remove sediment, again, out of the water. One of the key points is that we're not going in and regularly hammering the fish habitat and the wet habitat in the channel. We're going into these dry areas that are really the pressure relief valves that tend to clog up with sediment after big floods. If we're lucky, we won't have one for a decade, and then you'd have to go in and clean it. If we're unlucky, it could be next year after we clean it out, there's another major sediment event, and we go into these select areas where we're opening up the relief valves of the river because we've blocked off the river on the town side of it, or the village side of it. Quick summary, I think we'll kind of leave it there and open it up to questions. So, yeah. Do you want to? Go ahead.
So Roy, when you mentioned it's a medium to a long-term solution,
Yeah.
what does that mean? And I'm not gonna say quantify it to 38.27
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
but kind of an order of magnitude.
So we've tried to think about this. Based on our history, it could be a 2-year fix, a 5-year fix, maybe even stretch out to a decade. I think it'd be unlikely that you wouldn't have sediment movement and buildup over time in these areas, and you'd want to go back in. And if you hit that threshold where the velocity becomes erosive along the berm, or it could overtop the berm. We heard a lot of landowner accounts, interestingly, that in this flood, because the Irene sediment was left in the river, the flood levels were higher along the berm in some locations in this smaller flood. This was, I think we said it was about a 2 to 5 year, maybe a 10-year flood. Irene was like 50 to 100-year flood, but the river had less material in this location in it, so.
Cumulative.
Yeah, it could build up. I guess there's one other key is that, this area wants to build sediment, and when it builds past an excessive amount, because the river's blocked off, it can't transport. It's a budget. It comes in, it stores, it goes out. If you can give the river a little bit of maintenance and give it the capacity to move that sediment, you might actually get into a cycle, and some of our modeling suggests this, where the river is actually doing more work on its own rather than trying to move these massive amounts of material that are sitting there now. It just won't move all that material.
So it's really managing risk.
It's managing risk, exactly, yeah.
And can you say, he's worked on a project like this in Bennington, it's been done, and how long ago did you do it, and what's it looking like for recurrence?
So Irene blocked off several of their bridges. Similarly here, they have a berm or a flood control levee. It's one of the few official Army Corps, former Army Corps levees in the state. It protects the local high school. The bridge filled up, I would say, within 5 feet. I had to crawl under the bridge after Irene, and that bridge was cleaned out after Irene. And then the bridge is probably refilled now. It's probably got 8 to 10 feet of clearance now. So it was cleaned out down to 12 feet, and it's been building back up, and that's, in the past like 6 or 7 years. It's like this river. It comes out of the mountains. It's very rich in sediment and builds up.
Given that there's kind of 3 options in the world of risk, is you either accept it, you ignore it, or you manage it. Managing is the right way to go.
That's right. I think, what we were striving to do, even in the previous edition, was manage it with the least impact. I mean, it's a beautiful river, it's prized trout river, and we think this is an approach where, this isn't like a sort of run at the river, kind of hit it, because you have to really be careful about not damaging the habitat and getting these relief valves cleared out, and then getting out of the river, so, you don't have to keep, damaging the riverbed where everything's living.
Well, I think in the previous instance, and Irene is a case in had to do something, I think,
Yeah.
to deal with the risk. But that wasn't quite clear what that was. And so what you're really is proposing a way so that it's well known in advance.
That's right. Yeah, and one other thing I should add, based on not only our interaction with the state here and in the past in Bennington, is that both the state and the Army Corps have supported this approach, again, in these high-risk spots. So you'd still have to go to them and get a clearance, but, the river engineers and the field agents for the Corps are aware of this approach. They rely on the modeling that we've done previously to say, yes, this will work, this reduces the risks, and you're sort of stuck unless we decide to pick up a whole village and move away. That's kind of where we're at.
Heather?
So I just wanted to comment on something you said in infrastructure the other day, in that you made the comment that sediment would be brought down to a 1-year flood level. So it would still be, where we're bringing those berms down is still higher than the river. I don't know that you mentioned that tonight, but then
That's right.
one thing also that was important to me was the idea that someone like in Public Works would have a way to measure and monitor this, that we can do on our own, as part of our own maintenance, like we do for roads or whatever, so that we're evaluating after events what the buildup is doing, and we would have some sense over time what we would need to do to maintain this work. So I thought that was really good and important to know.
That's right. We've been starting to receive some comments as the plans have been getting out, and one was, how do you know when to go? And, typically we'll set benchmarks, and there'll be an elevation, and we can say from that benchmark, it's a few feet down, and you can use simple tools, a level or a rod, to go out there and say, yeah, we're getting close. And with that management, Gristmill Bridge is another place where there needs to be management. Again, if that bridge closes off, the water's going right onto the highway and into the village, like it has in the past. So we just did an exercise saying how much sediment buildup in that bridge would knock it out of design, meaning can it pass the 50-year flood still? So we know exactly the elevation from the beam down or from a benchmark up, where you could just monitor that, and we've set caution levels and then action levels. And the action level means if you get the design flood, the bridge could fail, or the flood's going to jump out and go into the village. And the caution level means you want to really keep your eye on it, because one good sediment event, it could knock it out of design and really increase the risk. So that's on the maintenance side. That's not an immediate part of this project, but it has to be part of the long-term maintenance of the sediment moving through this system.
So what's our next step in this?
Well, I think we met with the infrastructure committee, and part of our job is this is a new infrastructure project. So it's taking a look at that. What we asked for was a more defined sort of, what does that look like? How do we maintain that? And how much is it going to cost for us to do that too, to plan that in for our capital improvement budgeting. So it's not just the project, is the infrastructure committee approving taking on the maintenance of that too. And we had a fund for the Cross Street Bridge because it was a new infrastructure. We have to kind of look at it the same way. This is taking that on, can we do that? So what we asked for was a much more defined plan for that. We also need to take it to the neighbors and to the fishing community and get their feedback from it. I know that there's been some stuff that came through today, so we need to sort of take it back out to the community. We've come 7 years with their support, so that the people in East Middlebury understand this work. It's gonna impact them, what that looks like, and get their buy-in, which we always have done. So I think it's important to do that one more time now that we've revised the plans.
And then in addition to that, we're going to go to, we're sending these final plans. I sent them today to the Vermont Emergency Management. They have to send it to FEMA Regional and move forward on the second phase of the archaeological assessment. We did phase 1 where they said, here's where you're going to, if you disturb these areas, you're going to need to go further. Luckily, our footprint has been reduced with we're not excavating the island area, so that but we'll still have some sites that we're gonna probably need to do a phase one on. And then we're gonna get into, you know, assuming that the community embraces the project, we'll get into permitting. And then we can apply for FEMA round 2. So they called this phase 1, even though it was sort of phase 2 from our perspective. They put this was the sort of the construction part of the grant. They put it into 2 phases. We need to get, we need to get the benefit cost analysis to be over 1. It was over 1 last time, so I'm just getting into that now. So there's sort of a stepped approach that needs to happen, and then we apply for funding again.
And we need their approval, FEMA's approval in writing in order to really move forward with any kind of bond vote, so
Okay.
it's a tricky one.
It was educational, and thank you for
Yeah.
bringing
thanks
us
for having
up to date where you're at.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Roy.
Thanks for having us.
Jim.
Everyone.
Good evening.
So from fixing rivers to fixing bridges and rail lines, that's our transition here. We're here to talk about Printer's Alley. Before that, a brief update on our project. Since we last met, the State Senate Transportation Committee, the 5 senators on that committee, and the State House Transportation Committee, the 11 representatives on that committee, after a public hearing in Montpelier on the project, voted unanimously to support VTrans's project and to advance the project. Senator Mazza and Representative Brennan listed the reasons for that decision in an editorial that appeared in the Aston Independent. Following that editorial was a letter from Victor about the project, a letter from Brian about the project, an editorial from Angelo. I think taking all those into consideration, we've kind of closed a chapter on this project and are ready to move forward to the next chapter. That chapter will unfold in 2018, and I think that there are 2 key focal points in this upcoming year. One is the effort on the town's part to support our business community, our cultural and religious community in the town. And the second is getting this project underway in 2018. So with that in mind, there are 2 upcoming events I wanted to alert you to. At our February 28th Select Board meeting, I'll be joined by representatives from the Neighbors Together Community Action Group and the Better Middlebury Partnership to talk about ideas that will be put in place in 2018 to support the downtown, events, promotional campaigns, and so forth. Will be made possible by the first of 3 annual grants that the state has agreed to. This one is for an amount of $75,000 that will come to the town from the state for 2018. We'll use that as an opportunity to evaluate what works and what doesn't. So when we go back to the state in 2019 and again in 2020, it's with a sense of what's effective in town and with some measurable outcomes about what works and what doesn't here. So a grant agreement is in the works to that effect. That will come to you. But as that grant agreement is being prepared, I thought it would be useful for the Select Board to hear and have an opportunity to comment on some of the plans that are in place here to support our downtown. That's number 1. Number 2 is that we're now going to get underway with construction in March. Kubricki will probably be on the ground working on the drainage system. And so we've asked the VTrans project team to come back with an update for the Select Board just to give you a preview of what 2018 is likely to look like. Where the construction is going to take place, the impacts on our town, environmental issues, the kind of the full ball of wax of what 2018 involves. This is a year of primarily of drainage work, so we'll take a look at that, and we'll look at the activities that are in place on the state's part to prepare for the more significant parts of the project that will follow in 2020. Okay, so that's just a brief update on where we are with the project here.
we're looking at March 27th for that. Is that the date we?
March 27th is the tentative date here, so, following town meeting day, March 27th, the Kubricki will probably be on the ground here, and so it'll be a good opportunity to update the select board on the project and to answer any questions you might have about that. Okay?
What about the first weekend in May, that first weekend, where there is a lot of activity, the Maple Run and things like that?
I mean, has any accommodation been made for that?
Right. Do we, or maybe we don't have to worry about it?
I don't, well, they're working, the hours of operation in 2018 are Monday through Friday, 7 to 5, with occasional windows outside that as needed. So the weekends are free. And, there won't be any road closures this year as there were last summer. So we're talking about Printers Alley, Triangle Park, some very localized and small areas of impact. But I would encourage anyone on the select board or anyone in the community who has events that will take place during construction to let me know about them so we can negotiate timeouts, as we did with Festival on the Green this past year and so forth. And, Kubricki and the state has been shown themselves to be very willing to kind of work with the town to allow our events and activities to go forward. Okay, any other questions about kind of the larger project? No, okay. So what you have in front of you is a warranty deed that conveys 973 square feet from the National Bank of Middlebury to the town. It's what we refer to as Printers Alley, essentially the roadway that runs from Main Street down along the side of the bank and into the Marble Works property. The bank will keep to itself a 5-foot buffer along the side of the bank, and then the area from that 5 foot out over to the town-owned parcel that we call the old Lazarus Foundation will transition over to the ownership of the town. It's a key piece of real estate for the town to own. It's the entrance to Marble Works. The state is already committed to reconfiguring that parcel of land post-project according to the requirements of the town. So it gives us control over that piece of property and a seat at the table for its reconfiguration. Lots of opportunity there, I think, to create a great new entryway to Marble Works from there. So. The warranty deed has been twice in front of the Infrastructure Committee, and the Department of Public Works was involved in those discussions too. And what you now have in front of you, the Infrastructure Committee recommended that it come to the Select Board for final review and approval. And I think it's fair to say that the Department of Public Works is on board with the document you have in front of you. I would ask for your review and approval this evening. The document will not be signed, however, until the state and the National Bank of Middlebury have completed their agreement, which will include an easement underneath part of the town's new property, and that will be part of the drainage system that will run from Printers Alley out to Otter Creek. So once that's signed, then this document could be signed. So that's the long and short of this warranty deed you have in front of you, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
I'm assuming the bank was amenable to the revisions?
We
Yes.
have not heard back from the bank.
Oh, I thought
have
they
not heard.
had, okay.
Okay, so it needs to be contingent upon that, same as it was for us, okay.
Okay.
So I'm okay making the motion.
Make a motion.
Resolved that the town of Middlebury accept the conveyance from Middlebury National Corporation of a strip of land consisting of 973 square feet more or less, underlying a portion of Printers Alley in downtown Middlebury, that the town accept the conditions set forth in the proposed warranty deed, the final form of which must be acceptable to the town manager and town attorney, and that the town manager, Kathleen Ramsey, be authorized to execute any and all documents necessary to complete said transaction contingent upon the bank's willingness to accept the proposed revisions. Sorry,
I'll
I
second.
kind of went round and round because I was trying to figure out the best way to stick it in there. Just kind of put it at the
So we have
bottom.
a motion and second. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Any last questions of Jim? Okay,
Great.
thanks, Jim.
Well, thank you. I'll follow up with
Appreciate,
the,
when are the storyboards coming?
the storyboards are, just been, the 2018 one has just been finalized, so they're ready to go into the ground probably within the next couple of weeks. So
Great.
as the activity gets underway, we'll have 2 large 3x4 storyboards in town that tell the story of the project, the large story and then the 2018 story.
Great.
Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Susan and Dan.
Ta-da. Ta-da. I'll let Dan go through the thing, but it's the very exciting name of the Water Model and Calibration Report for the Middlebury water system. And it's being put together by Dufresne Group.
Right, so what we need to accomplish tonight is for you to authorize, well, actually, you can authorize yourselves to sign an engineering agreement, or a loan agreement a little bit later on. The first part is the engineering agreement with Dufresne Group. Just a reminder, we interviewed several firms, decided on that the Dufresne Group was the best selection. We negotiated a contract with them. And there's 2 parts of this. One is called basic services, which is most of the hydraulic study work. The second part has some special services with a not to exceed number. A majority of that is getting this Water Gems, which is the software that is used for the model, to get our hands on it and train us to use it in the future. So this engineering agreement was sent to the state. They've given it a heads-up nod and said, go ahead, get it done, get it back to us, and then get going on the revolving loan fund application. So this is a kind of a horse, cart, horse. We have to do them both in short order. So that we can keep them happy and getting the process moving. So the first part is to approve the engineering agreement with Dufresne Group, and the cost of that is $68,000 even.
Care to make the motion?
I would love to make the motion to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign the Dufresne Group Engineering Services Agreement for preparation of a water model and calibration report for the Middlebury water system for a cost not to exceed $68,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Okay, the second part is what you will need to sign at the end of the meeting. Hopefully, he has a form ready to go. This is the state revolving loan fund application for water infrastructure financing. It's as you saw, a multi-page document. A lot of it is financial qualifications and statements, predictions, forecasts of revenue, and also what our long-term and short-term expenses are. This is used by the state to secure funding from the Vermont Bond Bank. There was 2 routes we could have gone on this. One was directly to the bond bank or go through this program. The Vermont Bond Bank gives this program a little bit of a discount, a couple tenths of a percentage in savings, so we chose to go that way. I'll ask you to approve pursuing the state revolving loan, and then ask you to sign the loan paper on the back sheet, I guess it is.
So I'm going to make the motion to sign the State Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund application for $68,000 to fund the upcoming town water system engineering study.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
And that starts the big bell,
Ding, ding.
which is pretty exciting
Yeah.
for, going forward for Route 7 and Exchange Street water upgrades. So this is it.
And just a little bit of a note, I also sent in the priority list application early this week. So that can get going too. We'll know in a few weeks how we stand with that. The last one here is replacing the boiler at the Public Works building. It's the original boiler. It burns diesel fuel, which is sucked out of the diesel tank. Needless to say, it's probably a huge waste of energy to do that. So the one we have is leaking water all over the floor, and it's time to do something about it. So I got some pricing from a couple vendors and a couple options on boilers. The one we want to look at is the Bosch Green Star Combi boiler from Plouffe Boiler Mechanical. What a combi boiler is, it provides not only hydronic heat for the baseboard heat, but it also provides domestic hot water. In other words, the kitchen sink and bathroom water. That's what we call by domestic hot water. And so there is no hot water tank, there's no storage, because we're not there that often, 9, maybe 10 hours a day, and not there on weekends. We didn't want to spend money heating water when nobody's going to be there. So that's why I was pursuing the combi boilers. So the price we got from Plouffe was for $8,338, and I'm requesting you to approve that one.
And we had a lively discussion about it already, so looks like we might have another one.
Well, just one of the questions, what was raised in lively discussion is, we have gas service going down Route 7? And
Gas service is already there. It's not to the building yet, but I met with them last summer to find a spot where they could put the meter, and that would be on the back, call it the northwest corner of the building in the rear. The front half of the building uses this diesel-fueled boiler. The mechanics area has propane already in the back. And so what we would do is, there's the common wall where this would mount. There's propane piping on the other side of that wall. We would tap into that and fuel this boiler. And then if and when we get Vermont Gas to connect to the building, we would convert both systems to natural gas.
Okay, so this is really sort of we have to solve this now problem until the gas line can come in, but it's a readily convertible unit.
Yeah, it's a nozzle that's changed in the boiler. I'd like to roll the dice and say, can we make it till May? But
well, no, I
yeah.
understand fully what it's managing risk. So
Yeah,
I understand fully. I just wanted to. I figured the question was already looked at, but I just around clarification.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
So I'll make the motion to award a contract to Plouffe. Oh, sorry.
No. Oh,
Let me,
hold on, please.
I'll do the thing, then we can do that. To Plouffe Boiler and Mechanical Services, service for the purchase and installation of a Bosch Green Star 131 combi boiler for a total cost of $8,338.
I'll second.
Okay, Ross?
I had a question. I was wondering, was any consideration given
Please ask your questions so that
Can you
people
turn the
get
microphone
the
for him?
meeting.
Thanks, Dan.
Was any consideration given to some type of biomass boiler system, such as wood chip or wood pellet or something like that?
No.
Given they're a lot less expensive, given that we could probably get our fuel from a Vermont supplier to help with the economy, and perhaps most importantly, given the imperative from the state to start moving away from fossil fuels, I think it would be very prudent for us to at least get some pricing and look at not only the initial cost for getting it, but long-term fuel costs to see if it makes sense now to start transitioning our buildings over to non-fossil fuel heating, rather than putting it off, spending money on something that may have to be replaced in another decade or two. It's a consideration I think needs to be looked at, in my view.
Thanks, Russ.
Did the committee talk about that at all?
We did not.
Is this just for hot water in the front offices, or?
Front offices are.
The front offices are hot water baseboard.
Yeah.
And the mechanics, the back part of it is propane. The infrared tube heaters in the garage area, those are already fired by propane.
It was looking more at
Yeah.
what we have, and then I think the reach was to natural gas, not beyond that.
Right.
So,
And this would allow you to put the whole building onto natural gas.
Correct.
but Ross makes a good point. It's thinking beyond that, but that's not what we considered.
Well, that thinking beyond it may be relevant when we get an idea what we want to do to upgrade the building in its entirety at some future point.
That's the point I was going to make.
Yep.
Because we are looking at that. We're looking at the future of that building and our other buildings, and we do want to be moving toward non-fossil fuel-based heating systems for those upgrades. But I see that we have an emergency, just like we would as a homeowner, and have to make a decision. But and it's hard to think about putting a bio system in to a building that's
Right.
may not have a very long future.
Well, it may not just be a matter of a boiler, it can be a matter of the entire system. So that's a much
Mhm.
bigger picture. We have an immediate issue to deal with, and so this is a viable solution.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? And we'll go ahead and vote on the motion then. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you.
We do have a project underway to look at our future needs, Ross, and I think that's a very good comment as we look at the future needs. Because we've decided not to acquire the lands across the road that don't meet the future needs, so.
I understand the police station is also maybe looking at updating their boiler, and that's another area where you might want to have, at least look at the option of biomass and see if it's viable.
Kathleen?
Okay. So in your packet, you have a proposed finance and maintenance agreement with the state of Vermont for the railroad crossing improvements at Morse Road. You note that Public Works Director Bill Kernan had several comments, which I relayed in an email to the state. We do not have the revised contract back from the state yet, but perhaps you could approve signature of the agreement pending satisfactory return of the agreement from the state. The state had indicated that they were willing to accept the changes the town requested.
Should I make
So-
Go for it, Heather.
Yeah.
So are we ready for, yeah? So, I'll make a motion to accept, to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign a finance and maintenance agreement with V-Trans regarding recently completed improvements to the at-grade rail crossing at Morris Road, pending approval from V-Trans.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Next, we have a request from the Northeast Archaeology Research Center, Inc. for deed of gift of artifacts recovered from Native American sites on town land during archaeological fieldwork in 2010 and 2012. In a January 22nd letter, Robert Bartone, Director of the Northeast Archaeology Resource Center in Framingham, Maine, requested the town's permission to bring more than 700 recently cataloged Native American artifacts recovered from 3 archaeological sites on town-owned land along Otter Creek to the Vermont Heritage Center, where they will be permanently housed and made available for research, education, and public interpretation. The recovered items were part of an archaeological fieldwork that the Northeast Archaeological Research Center conducted in 2010 and 2012 on behalf of CVPS and Green Mountain Power as part of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's hydroelectric relicensing process. More information about the work, including descriptions of the recovered artifacts, can be found in the letter, which is included in your packet. By signing the deed of gift to the Archaeology Heritage Center, the town would waive all present or future rights to the recovered artifact, their use or disposition.
Seems like a rightful place.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, so I'll move that we authorize our town manager to sign the deed of gift, allowing the transfer of all those things recovered from the town-owned land.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other questions, comments? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. So we're preparing for a public hearing.
Right. I just want to take this opportunity to give you a heads up that at your next meeting, you will be having a public hearing on the proposed zoning amendments. So if you have read the zoning regulations and have any questions, Jennifer Murray, our Director of Planning and Zoning, is here and happy to guide you further through the process if you have any questions. Or I also extended an invitation for you to convey any suggestions you have for consideration by next Friday.
So I've only gotten through about half of them so far.
I'm still reading.
But one thing, I just wanted to make a request, if it's not too much trouble for staff. On your summary page, next time, could you list the page that it refers to in the zoning document? Like you give the number of the section, but the page would be really helpful if that's not too much trouble. Because I've wanted, it's obviously a long document and I've spent a lot of time scrolling, and if I could refer to the summary and know what page to go to find it, that would be great in the future. And so that's this Friday, you would like comments back from us?
Next Friday.
Oh, I thought you said 16th.
Oh, 16th, sorry, that's right, to give us a week to research and.
Right, so if we have comments, you would like them from us by Friday?
Yes, please.
Okay. I will do my best.
Thank you.
I looked already, I don't have any, so
Okay. Thank you.
good to know.
Nor do I.
Did you have anything you wanted to point out?
Not at all.
She's fine. Okay, has everybody looked at our first draft of the town meeting agenda? And I know Kathleen has been in touch with everyone about your part in presenting, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate and present. I think it worked really well last year. And we talked a little bit about it afterwards. I think everybody was happy with that. Is there anything?
Just want to highlight Heather's initiative to have an informal community reception before the annual town meeting from 6:15 to 6:45.
Chris English and I will be visiting the school about setup and So I was hoping to get some clarity tonight on what this proposal actually is and how you envision it, so that we can make sure that we're setting up the check-in and people who aren't voters, where they're going. And so is this, like, it sounds like, do you envision it like people come and they check in and they're in the checked-in area and
Yes.
food and things would be there?
That's the way I envisioned it.
And so,
So, sorry to interrupt, but you should tell us what you need too, and so we make sure to set it up for what works for you. And I think Kathleen is, I don't know on that part of it. I'm just trying to create an atmosphere where we might have a little community.
Yep.
So you tell me what would work,
no,
and we'll try to set it up.
I understand exactly what you're trying to do, and
Okay.
I think that's lovely and wonderful.
Okay.
But it is kind of a new space for us, and typically I would have election officials there to check people in starting about 6:15.
Okay.
And then like a rush of people usually come about 6:30, and then we get like a mass of people by quarter of, and everybody's checked in by 7. But for the town meeting, what we will have to do is kind of set up an area at the back of the gymnasium where there's quite a length for people to line up, because they all come kind of at once. And we also have typically an alley or area where people who are non-voters can kind of go through, and they go around the check-in tables, and they're kind of on an outer level, like in the old gym, which was the bleacher area. And so I'm just thinking we need to have that clear and be able to get people in and checked in. And so if you do have kind of mingling and snacks and refreshments available, obviously, if they're inside that area, that does exclude anyone who is a non-voter. But if you have it outside that area, then it's going to get really tricky about people checking in, and if they're kind of all over the place. So my preference would be, yeah, that we have tables someplace inside the check-in area.
Okay.
It does exclude people who are not registered voters, but
Maybe we can
otherwise
set
I'm
the
not.
table up across the line,
I was gonna
so
say,
there's access to both sides.
the catering in me person says just put it up along the barrier if it's
So-
those little ribbons.
Okay, so actually
that they can reach right
actually
over.
use some tables
Right.
as a barrier.
Right,
And then people
So-
can, and they can talk across the tables.
but
Yeah.
When are you going, and do you want me to try to go too?
If
Or
you-
does
if
that,
you-
does that complicate things for you?
No, if you'd
Because
like to be there, it sounds like setup can start there around 4:00.
Okay.
And
So the space is kind of L-shaped, and there's 2 clear entries into that space. You know, it would be possible, anyway, we don't have to take time now,
you guys
but
could work it out.
if you
Right.
want some help in how to set that up, you know.
Okay,
Anyway,
yeah,
we
because
can
I'm
talk about it.
thinking it sounds like it's kind of an inclusive thing, but yeah, we don't want any like strange kind of things, like with people kind of being all over the place when they're supposed to check in and be in a certain area, so.
Right.
But I can see that, yeah. So I can connect with
Okay.
you
Okay.
about that, and we can make that work better.
How many seats do you think we're gonna be able to fit in there?
I think they said they can handle about 300, which I think we would need all of that. They don't have that many chairs, so we will have to get some there from someplace. I'm figuring typically around 250 would be enough for our actual meeting, but then we probably need at least 50 outside the barrier for non-voters.
Okay.
So around 300. And then, if we're good with that, I just had a comment about the agenda. And this is just having to do with protocol, because I personally think very much of town meeting as being a meeting, it's the town people's meeting. And to me, it's not a select board meeting. and it's run by the moderator who is elected by the people. And so just how I see some of this, I would really like to request that this opening after Article 1 be changed just a little bit in terms of it's usually the moderator will call the meeting to order, will read the warning, and then usually introduces the board or anyone else there, and is usually the one that requests non-residents be allowed into the kind of inner circle. And then I could see him inviting Brian Ford to give welcoming remarks and highlights in that. It's just the way this was written up with the welcome first and then you introducing the board, and it's just kind of a protocol thing to me that I'd like to see the moderator kind of in charge of that meeting. And so if you
The
guys
governor
are,
does a good job with it, I won't disagree with you there.
so if you're amenable to those changes, I'd like to request those, just that the introductions and the request to admit the non-residents in, and then he would introduce you as welcoming remarks in that.
Well, I'm fine with that as long as the board is, so.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, and I will connect with you, and that'll be great. Thanks.
And while you're still up there, and as we're still talking, because the other thing that I see is that there's a request that comes to you of display. So both at the polls and at town meetings. So how do we envision that occurring?
It'll depend on what we have, and we usually have handouts and things, and more than likely it'll be that same type of table thing, and there will be a table. Because usually what I do at the evening meeting is just have a few tables available for things to be out. The Australian ballot will be here in this building, and I think the last town meeting was a good learning experience for us, and we're actually going to change the direction that we have people go. So last year we had people come in to the lobby, check in, come into the small room, come through here, and go out the door. And what we're going to have them do this year is they'll actually end up coming in this double door here, going around this way, and then when they have checked out, they'll end up back in the lobby where we'll have some tables there as they're coming out with information or anything like that.
So what happens in that room then?
It's all part of the whole process in terms of, like, you've got your channels for people to check in, and then you have the voting booths, and you have where the ballots go and into the tabulator, and then they need to go check out. And we just like to set it up so it's like definitely beginning and ending in a certain doorway, and that it flows nicely. And so if people have finished voting and they end up in the lobby, will be easier this year for us to have the tables and things right there for any information that's set out or surveys or anything like that.
So the surveys would be out in the lobby rather than at the checkout where the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Last year, we had the surveys and information at a table here after people went through the checkout, and they didn't necessarily stop there. So I think if they're in the lobby, there's more chance of them to do that.
Okay. And just the reception area, so is this, could you say more about that? Because I've heard reference to it, but I don't really know too much about what you're envisioning for the reception. Or is it still being formed?
It's still being formed.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like maybe
it's-
dessert and cider
yeah,
kind of thing.
It's gonna be
Very-
low-key, you know, some light refreshments, an opportunity for the community to gather before the meeting and connect with neighbors and possibly connect with us, and just try to, more like a community building opportunity. And it's gonna be a learning process for scheduling and check-in and
Yeah, I might
how it
have
all
people
works
come a little
and-
bit earlier for that
and-
check-in then. Or whatever.
Yeah, and how the refreshments, I mean, it's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve.
And this is all in response to the feedback we got last year about how to conduct town meeting, where people desired a little bit of social time before the meeting started, and then they wanted a platform where they could participate more during the meeting, which is why we're at Mary Hogan this time.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Ann.
That's all the questions I had on this.
Okay. Farhad, are you ready for the check warrants?
Laura also wanted to go over the town meeting survey.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, the town meeting poll.
Right, so I just
Certainly.
wanted an opportunity to have you take another look at this, and it's in your packet. So we're just asking people to give us some feedback. It's an opportunity, again, to inform people about the ways that we could communicate with them. And they could sign up for the town email list, and they could also give us some indication of their satisfaction with various government services, as you can see there. So we'll ask them to think about the present level of spending on different town services, and if they feel they should be increased, reduced, or stay about the same, so just to gauge direction about that. We see a major library project, for example, so we can just kind of see how people are gravitating. And they can just offer any other general comments or suggestions, both regarding our services and the town meeting itself. So that's the intention of the poll. I added a question about policy possibilities, if you take a look at that question, so you can indicate on a scale of 1 to 5 whether you strongly agree or disagree about a number of things. And I proposed just a couple so you could see what you could do with a question like that. We had somebody that approached the board about plastic film shopping bags, so this would just be a way of seeing what the appetite is for something like that. We have been looking at parking, and we have an opportunity to ask if people want to see something changed, especially on Main Street where parking is most needed in terms of turnover, and if there are some ideas that they have for managing that, either through limiting the time or having metered parking like they do in Burlington. So we'll see, so it's an opportunity to get a little bit of feedback.
I just have a comment on that, on the policy, the 15-minute parking. People go to shop, I don't think that's
Yeah.
gonna work, 15-minute, right?
Well, it's 2 hours now.
So do you want to change it
So
to a
I
different
think
time?
you should, if you're looking to see if there's an
Please
appetite
type out.
for shorter, I think you need to, you went from 2 hours to 15 minutes,
Okay.
maybe ask reducing it to an hour or something like that.
Okay, so let's try that.
I'm just wondering on
Mhm.
your question on town government services, and I'm curious, you say, you're asking, do you think the present level of spending on various services should be increased, reduced, or stay the same? And I wonder whether that's the right question or whether the services are adequate. In other words, I think everyone would like to see the spending on services reduced if they could be, but they want the services. And it would seem to me that the question really you're asking are whether some agencies, some might feel that certain agencies of government are doing too much or not doing enough, or so in other words, I think it's the services that are provided, whether they're adequate, whether they could be increased, or whether they're redundant, or something like that, rather than spending, because I think we all agree that once we decide that what needs to be done, we try to be efficient and economical in providing the services, but
Okay.
I think
So as you think about the present level Or as you
Yeah.
think about the present level of town
No,
services, town services, do you feel
Yeah,
they're,
are they adequate? Yeah,
are they adequate?
I think that would be, the question that you really want to know.
Okay,
Tie in the pay to performance.
Mm.
Are you happy with the performance of these services?
Yeah.
Or do you think, are they adequate? Would you like
Yeah.
more?
okay, I'll revise that. I think that's a good suggestion.
Can
Okay.
I make one suggestion? If we keep in the question about comments or suggestion on how town meeting was conducted, particularly at Mary Hogan, and how they thought that went, could we include something about whether they participated in, what are we calling it? The reception.
Informal.
Did you participate in the reception? And I'm not good with surveys, but some feedback on that part of it, just so, did they participate and did they like it or not? I don't know.
Okay, I think I can work it.
I will leave that to the
Okay.
master. You maybe can get a sense
Okay,
of what I'm trying to,
okay.
was it worthwhile doing or not? Getting some
Okay.
feedback on that.
Well, if you support those changes, then I would make those changes and then have the survey ready for early voting, which is upon us, which is starting tomorrow. So, can I work with you on that, Erin? Okay.
Thank you for doing that,
Okay.
Laura.
Yes.
So good.
I think we should call it the Assembly poll.
No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Ross?
Thanks. In the Energy Committee, we've had discussions about, it would be really helpful for us to know how many households in Middlebury have converted to LEDs. And we thought about, that would be a great survey question, but we didn't get together to do such a survey, and I didn't know if there would be time and room, or if it's just out of line, to ask to maybe have a question in there, just, whether or not people have switched over to LEDs in their home.
Do you
Why
fit that in?
LEDs? I can, but.
LED lights, the efficient lights, because that's the thing we've tried to give out in town. We do that pretty much yearly. Kind of wondering how successful have we been? Have we reached everybody? Is there still a lot of people? It would just give us a feel for how we're doing
Okay,
with those
okay,
energy efficient light bulbs. Yeah,
okay. All right, yes.
thank you.
Anything else?
We're going
Okay.
too far hot on the check warrants.
Okay. Okay.
There we go. So I did the check review today, everything seems to be fine. So I would like to move to approve total expenditures in the amount of $395,035.94, out of which $292,875.47 goes to accounts payable, and $102,160.47 goes to payroll.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Kathleen?
Okay. A couple updates. First, on net metering. Chris English and I met with Kevin Jones of the Vermont Law School and his Vermont Community Solar Team to discuss the town's interest in developing a net metering RFP and/or exploring potential renewable energy projects on town-owned land. Kevin and the team underscored the rapidly evolving and complex rules governing the renewables market, and based on their experience working with other municipalities, strongly recommended that the town take the time to develop a renewable energy strategy for municipal facilities before issuing an RFP. Taking Kevin up on his offer to make a presentation here in Middlebury on the subject, we have scheduled a meeting at the town offices on Thursday, February 22nd, from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m., so interested parties can learn more about developing a renewable energy strategy. I've extended the invitation to the Energy Committee and various interested parties. So next Thursday, 4:30 to 5:30 here at the town offices. Also want to bring to your attention some legislative updates. as noted in the January 19 and January 26 issues of the VLCT Weekly Legislative Report included in your packet, the House Government Operations Committee took testimony recently on a committee bill that would make substantial changes to the open meeting law. Among these proposed changes is a narrowing of the definition of what constitutes a meeting to include any communications of a serial nature between at least two members of a board, either directly or through intermediaries, to discuss or take action on any business of the public body, even if the individual communication does not involve a quorum of the public body. The proposed legislation would also create a new open government ombudsman position that would be empowered to investigate alleged violations of the open meeting law and mediate disputes between public bodies and individuals alleging violation. Both of these actions underscored the increased scrutiny that municipalities could be under in regard to compliance with the open meeting law. VLCT will continue to report on the proposed legislation as it moves through committee. And then finally, on this Thursday at 4:30 to 5:30 p.m., we'll be having a reception for departing Parks and Recreation Director Terry Arnold.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes.
Can I go back to the net metering thing?
Yep.
So your note says, develop a renewable energy strategy for municipal facilities. What does that mean exactly?
So we've had an interest in net metering. We've also had a interest in either solar or some biomass at the wastewater treatment facility. We've had an interest in solar on the rec roof, and we've also had an interest expressed in some type of hydro on the falls and hydro in our water lines, perhaps, if that's feasible. So all of those things, we have a limited, though large, electric demand that we would like to offset, so better quantifying how our demand matches up with all of these renewable energy projects we have in mind.
So who works on that?
So the Vermont Community Solar Team, which is essentially a series of grad students.
So they actually do that part for us?
Or help us with it.
Or help,
Yeah.
cool, thank you. And then,
Go ahead.
can I ask more?
You got one more question?
Okay. Uh-oh, I'm getting censored.
Flag.
If this legislative stuff changes, can we have someone come, I want it to be real clear, this sounds like when I communicate with you about this reception, does this now become?
I'm not a member of the select board.
Okay.
But if you copied somebody
But
else.
but if Susan and I are talking about setting up this reception, does that now become not okay?
Well, I don't know about this reception per se, since that's not a public meeting and not making
Well, it
it.
is, because it's,
That's the problem.
I think so.
Setting up the reception?
so I guess what's not clear to me is, remember when
Well,
VLCT?
there will be a lot
Yeah.
of
So you-
definition coming out from
Okay.
VLCT, and
And
they can help us with that.
VLCT has already said that they've already had some response from the committee that they're thinking of overhauling that lane. There's definite problems.
Okay.
But yes, what you were
So
saying is part of the problem. If you're talking to somebody else on the board that has anything to do with town business, would be considered an open meeting. Or even if you talk to me and then I talk to Laura, that would somehow be, it's a crazy.
Well, I guess it's not such a big deal if it is, other than I think it should be clear to, so I was just gonna request, if they're gonna make changes, that you had VLCT come here and do a training with us, that if it's gonna change, can we do that again? So we're clear, and then it might make sense to consider that email through the town website, you know, that we all have an official government email that kind of stuff goes through, rather than personal, that we might want to look harder at that if some of this changes goes into effect.
Some of those changes could be very difficult. I mean, I'm totally in favor of open meeting law and having everything public and transparent in that, but some of these things they're talking about, I would certainly encourage everyone to contact your legislators and tell them that this would be too harsh a change. It's like,
This
taking
is-
any conversation
Yeah.
that people have and calling it a public meeting, and that could get way out of hand.
It's a little excessive.
It's very excessive, yeah, yeah.
It
So-
does, I mean, I'm concerned, I mean, the way, so far, the way it's defined, it seems like you have to meet at least two people meet more than once to discuss an issue that may come up before the select board as business, because he uses the term serial nature. So I suppose if you have a sequence of meetings, and I'm a little concerned. I'm interested in seeing how they spell this all out in the legislation, but I think it could create, you know, you drive home together. You know, and
Yeah.
I mean, people have coffee together, breakfast together, or obviously the concern, and I think it's a serious concern, is that the town business should be done at open meetings. I think that's absolutely right. I suppose what would be wrong if a group of the board sort of got together and decided that they were going to work the meeting in one way or another so that the outcome came out, you know, to their desired end, in which case that would be a misuse of communication. It's very difficult to do, and I hope they know what they're doing. I'm not altogether confident they do, but
I guess what was concerning for me was in here where it says any communications.
Yeah.
You know, like,
well, serial communicated, is it?
yeah, but I'm thinking about, you know, we talk about emailing, I guess is, you
Yes,
know.
yes.
You know,
So this
now,
is-
you know, it's always been, you know, if I communicate with somebody one-on-one, it's not been considered a meeting, but now if I'm communicating back and forth with one of you about something, now it could potentially be considered, that could be.
A conversation.
Yeah, could be considered a meeting, so.
So I think Ann's made a good point. This is early in the session, and it's still in committee, and we do have House representatives from right here in Middlebury who can provide the thoughts of our local governance, what we feel, I mean, it needs to be some reasonable standard that we can achieve and not have to, every time we meet, write up notes and make it a matter of public record. And so it seems to me like they're getting a little out of, I think they have bigger problems to solve than this, and if this is what they're spending their time on, I'm a little concerned, so.
Did you have a question on net
Yes, I have a
metering?
quick question. Yeah, on the reception, the reading of the select board's resolution, it's on Thursday as well as on the town meeting day? On both? Okay.
Okay, board member concerns. Laura?
Well, tomorrow's Valentine's Day, so it's an opportunity to show the love, lots of ways. And one way you can show the love is by helping the Middlebury Area Land Trust. They have a bake benefit at the Flatbread tomorrow night. You can show the love to our Career Center. They're having their annual meeting, and then the next day they're having a fabulous open house. So that's another opportunity, and we're going to be showing love to our Mary Hogan school students that walk and roll to school. We were supposed to do that last week, but the storm interfered, so we'll be serving hot cocoa, thanks to Monument Farms, our friend, tomorrow mornings. And I just wanted to let you know that we've been recognizing winter bike commuters with some neat swag. So if I catch a winter bike commuter, I give them some swag. And so I rode over to the middle school, and I counted 9 bicycles on the racks out there on a 9-degree day. It was just amazing. They're so hardcore and wonderful. So I think that it is trickling up, the efforts to try to encourage students to walk and roll to school, and so we're excited about that. And I know that we have a Winterfest coming up soon on February 24th to celebrate being outside and our local businesses. So we have lots of opportunities to love our downtown and our infrastructure.
Thank you, Laura. Victor?
Well, I would just like to congratulate you, Brian, on the editorial. I thought it was fine, well written, set the record straight, and I hope the public will read it. I think it's a very fine document. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, well, as you've been mentioned, Terry Arnold, our Parks and Rec director, is going to be departing, and I have to say I'm sorry to see her go, but it's inevitable that we have change, and I understand why she's moving on at this time. I've been on the board now long enough that I remember what Parks and Rec was like before Terry comes along, and to say it has increased in quality exponentially is an understatement. I mean, it's so much better, and professionalism she's brought has been fantastic. But the times that really stand out for me of having Terry on here was during this little project that we took on, building a new town rec center. And the fact is that she brought, at the right time in the town's history, and I chaired that committee, but many times she ran it. She brought this level of professionalism on not only programming, but also understanding the facilities. And so as we went through this once in a long time experience, she helped the architects, she helped us on town staff, and the board, town staff, understand the role of a contemporary public rec facility. And when I look at that building now, which is just a marvelous building, and I look at the programs that she and Dustin have put together and how good they are, and I'm overwhelmed at what she has accomplished. And she says she's been here for 5 years, and it seems like work that the average person would take 50 to do. So I'm unfortunately not going to be able to be at Thursday's reception. This day job has me on a real long airplane ride, but I just wanted to get that out. So much. I really appreciate Terry, and good luck on your next venture. Enjoy Washington State, and we're going to cross paths again somewhere.
Thanks, Nick.
I wanted to talk about the trees at the airport real quick. I saw in the board packet that the project is getting wrapped up, and VTrans really hasn't addressed the cut trees in an acceptable manner. I know Kathleen's done a really good job trying to communicate with them. I think they're ignoring us and ignoring the situation, or talking about it with people that aren't related to the town and coming to conclusions about it. And I really, I'm a little concerned that we're not saying anything as the project wraps up, and that the town made a decision about what we wanted a year ago. That didn't happen. So what are we going to do? And we're sort of trying to work with VTrans, but they don't seem to really be responding to those kind of things. They really aren't talking with Chris Ioli either. So I just want to note it for the record that we as a board probably shouldn't just let that go. We set up certain parameters for them, and they haven't met it. And I'm disappointed that they're not working with us on it.
What was this? What did Chris feel is a acceptable solution to that?
Well, he wanted to meet with them, didn't he, Kathleen? He wanted to have some.
So going back to the initial work in the right-of-way permit, Chris had specified that as much of the existing understory be retained as possible.
Mhm.
Then that did not happen in the work, so subsequently, he went back and suggested that there be some planting of seedlings to restore some noise and dust barrier. We met out on the site with representatives of V-Trans, and they said that they were going to do some survey work and look into the request. I've requested this survey work from V-Trans since it was done and have not received it yet. It's just so that we could figure out what rightfully is in the right-of-way and that we have any jurisdiction before we continue this conversation much further.
And my concern is if they're wrapping it all up, they may not come back and do that. And so I just want the board to be aware of that. And I know, like I said, Kathleen's done a good job, but sometimes when these things get wrapped up, then they like, well, we're done. You should have said something. And I just want to be careful about that.
It does sound like we've got something on record, though, that you want to survey.
Is there anything else we can do as a board to sort of support that and for you going forward? No?
Would you like to formally request a copy of the survey from V-Trans?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just think as a board, we should say something of what's the status, what's going on, where are we at with that as, if they're closing out the project, where does it stand for us? And will that continue after, or should we be wrapping that up as the project wraps up?
Heather?
I just want to thank Kathleen for taking my request at the last meeting to see the new ladder truck and making that happen tonight. Also to Chief Shaw and Assistant Chief Myron Selleck. I had never had a tour of the new fire station, and Myron gave me a wonderful tour tonight. And I just appreciate them taking time to meet us there tonight and showing us the firehouse and the new ladder truck and getting to sit in it. And so thank you, Kathleen. And
Did you get to start it?
We got a lot of good
I
pictures.
didn't get it, but it was very tempting to just want to start that engine and drive it out of the fire station.
Like, throw open the door, let's go.
It is beautiful, and what's really impressive is seeing it parked next to the old one. And they did, I think the committee did a fantastic job outfitting that truck. They've used every available space, and it's very impressive, and I think as a community, we should be really proud of our fire department and our equipment, and so I just want to say good
And
job.
that station is amazing.
Yes.
You know, it's an archive of amazing history, and you'll have a chance to see it Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah. So, that's it.
Thank you. Farhad?
And I completely missed it, the tour. I should call David and make an appointment to go see it. I completely spaced out on that. Nick, you said so well about Terry Arnold. She was not only a great Parks and Rec director, but she was a great family friend to me, and she will be missed. Hopefully, good luck to her in the new endeavors, and happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Happy Valentine's Day.
All right, so I think it's time for us to adjourn here, and so I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? All right.
Thank you.